And here we go. We have liftoff. Propulsion continues to be normal.
R68 chamber pressure looks good.
Traveling up. Roger, planet.
Water towers fly! Yes!
Tango down to nominal.
Fighting downside speed off. Bring in speed off. Off. It's orange!
Orange 25! Oh my god! Oh my god!
Equalize.
What is it?
Put that in the big bag,
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together, back to the moon and beyond.
If there's methane, it'd be igniting in the flare, correct?
Yikes. You read?
We don't need any more of these.
All right, folks, let's see. I see the audio bar jumping. That's how professional we are here at NASA Space Flight's live stream auxiliary command right now. There is another live stream happening, as you may be aware. But Alicia and I are here to do this week's NSF Live / Astro Live show with Intrepid Museum. Alicia, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing today, Dus?
Well, I see the bar jumping over there, so I assume that the audience can hear you. Chat, can y'all hear Alicia there as well?
5x5s. Give us some 5x5s.
It looks like we've got lots of 5x5s in chat over there. Our production team is so small, we actually ask our viewers to help us out with the broadcast. So as always, thank y'all for getting us started here. Also special for today, you'll see on all the windows, all the scenes here, we've got ASL interpretation, increasing the access for folks who can enjoy and participate in this content. So massive thanks to the ASL interpretation team for supporting us. I'm going to have to remember to take breaths and talk more slowly. Alicia, what's our topic today?
Yeah, so we are talking about crew capsule recovery. Actually a really great topic for us to be talking about this year in particular, because for those of you who aren't familiar, the Intrepid Museum is actually housed inside of course, the former U.S.S. Intrepid, which is celebrating its 80th commissioning anniversary this year. So it was constructed in 1943. It served during World War II, the Cold War, the Vietnam War. Also, though, it picked up 2 space capsules during the space race. So what a perfect topic for us to be covering today. In this picture, actually, you can see the recovery from the Gemini mission, Gemini 3. The first one we did was actually Scott Carpenter. So it was the Mercury Aurora 7 capsule in 1962. In May, actually, just in a couple of days, we'll be celebrating that anniversary.
That's an archive photo for ants, Alicia. Hang on, I'll get it. There we go.
So that particular mission, yeah, he was in space for, it's early space days, only about 5 hours. And actually, funny enough, he got a little distracted. There's some kind of a fun story about that where we're not really sure what happened, but he ended up hitting his reentry thrusters about 2 seconds too late and came in about 250 miles off course. So, of course, back then they were looking for him in a specific spot. He wasn't there. They thought we might have lost him. Mass chaos, lots of panic on the late news and everything. And then ultimately, though, they tracked him down. And he was fine. He was just out there, sunbathing and offered the diver, some of his food and everything like that. No problem. But ultimately, the Intrepid was actually flagged to come be the prime recovery vessel because they just happened to be the closest aircraft carrier. Yeah, it wasn't even supposed to be them. But that was convenient. And then, of course, later in 1965, we had Gus Grissom and John Young on the Gemini 3 mission, which we were supposed to be picking them up too.
Okay, that's this one.
Yep, that's the one. So we've got some great photos in our collections of us, craning those big capsules up onto our aircraft elevators. And then, of course, with them roaming around on our decks as well. So a really cool topic for us to be covering today. We have love this picture. Yeah, so that's right, because we were expecting to have them. So they made a giant welcome home cake. And if you look closely in the picture, you can actually see they're cutting it with swords because, a big cake needs a big knife, right?
It needs to be cut with a sword, which I guess just happened to be on board a Navy vessel, huh?
It's true. And we actually had an exhibit, not too long ago about cakes. And about Navy cakes, because that was a big deal. You got to feed, 3,000 hungry young men on those ships out at sea.
I remember that one. There was a cake, and it looked very realistic. And I was like, "Is that a real cake?" It wasn't a real cake.
We still have it. We still have it out.
Really?
So, come by the ship, please do. You can come and, don't take a bite of it or anything, but it's there. It's
Intrepid
there.
Museum not responsible if you try to take a bite of the cake that's been there for a few years.
It's not real. You'll eat a mouthful of not delicious things. So anyway, yes,
it's interesting. It's really interesting because we used to use aircraft carriers to recover capsules, and it's like helicopters off the aircraft carriers, and how much that's changed to today. That's something that we're going to be talking with our guests from NASA here. At least I jumped right in. I was so excited about helicopters.
No, that's exactly right. I mean, it really is amazing how far we've come since the space program started, and really we started picking up capsules in the 60s. And, obviously not only in terms of what we have accomplished, but also in terms of crew safety and recovery of these vessels. And, now even we're able to reuse them, because back then you would take it on in and pull all the information off and they'd end up in a museum.
Previously, the reuse was the museum. Like, we reuse the capsule by putting it in a museum.
Yeah, but now they're actually reusing it to go back up into space. So we've got some really amazing guests with us today who are going to be talking all about that. We've got, we're going to be covering the Artemis program, going back to the moon. We're going to be covering all the commercial crew programs that you see, with SpaceX launching things like we've got on the other channel right now with Axiom. So yeah, really exciting show coming up for us.
Let's hop right in. Shall we bring in our special guests from NASA?
Yeah. All right, let's do it.
All right, I think that's this button. Yeah. Cool, I found the right button.
Great. Excellent. So welcome. With us today, we've got Sam Testa, who is the NASA Recovery Director and SpaceX lead for Commercial Crew Program. So she's responsible for the astronaut recovery missions during crewed returns to Earth from the International Space Station. So when astronauts are flying with SpaceX or with Boeing. And most recently, she led the Crew 3, 4, and 5 returns, which is also very exciting because Crew 4, we were actually just talking about before, we had Jessica Watkins with us a couple months ago at Kids Week. She was on Crew 4. We loved hearing all about her exciting time at the ISS too there. So yay, thank you so much for joining us. And then also we've got Lily Villarreal, who's the Artemis II Recovery Director in Exploration Ground Systems at NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida. And she leads NASA's efforts for recovery of astronauts and the Orion hardware for the Artemis crewed missions, which of course everyone is so excited about as well. And you are also part of the Artemis I kind of return and efforts as well, even though there weren't people on board that just yet. So very excited to have you both on. And, again, just diving into all of this, again, we have come so far in terms of how we're able to recover these things and in terms of how we're able to keep our astronauts safe when we bring them home. And yeah, we've got another launch going on right now. Axiom 2 crew is literally prepping for their trip to the International Space Station.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I have a question to kick off the whole thing with the guests here. Are y'all busy today? Your crew recovery, there's a crew launch happening today.
Right now.
Do y'all get the day off? You've just done your job so well that the teams are just all like clockwork. Are you watching the launch today? You're on our show.
SpaceX, Axiom, those guys are super busy today with their launch. NASA has a small contingent of people in our control rooms helping out, keeping an eye on things, supporting as needed. But we're really just here as backups. Those guys have it all covered.
No kidding. And I guess we're not launching Artemis today, Lily, right?
No, but I am here on site, and if things go well and the weather is good, I'll probably go outside and watch it. So looking forward to seeing that. I'm hoping that maybe I'll be able to go outside and wave to the crew as they head over to the pad. That's one of the traditions that we like to do.
So they're still, I guess, suiting up. I actually need to look at the timeline before I know, but I think they're getting ready to go. They're not actually in the rocket yet, right?
I don't know. I was looking up the timeline before we started. I'm like, what time do I need to be out there? I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to, but I usually love saying goodbye to all the crew members that come by. They'll drive the Teslas right by my office building, and we'll come out and we'll wave really big and say goodbye. And they usually lower the window and wave goodbye. So it's kind of cool.
I'm actually asking our other production team where they are. I can answer this question for us, but
usually
the launch is currently
the helicopters. Yeah, when I hear the helicopters, I know it's getting close.
Yep. The launch is currently scheduled for 5:37 Eastern time. So right around 3:10-ish, I think they should be finishing up or, getting ready in their suits and getting ready to head over to the pad pretty soon. So keep an eye out your window, Lily.
Yeah, I'll
There you
probably
go.
be able to hear it and see it.
I told our other production team to ping me over here in text whenever they're getting, like, when they've done their walkout and stuff like that. I'm about to get an answer. But that's the interesting thing. Like, we talk about crew recovery, and everybody knows, like, they've come back from space, they've already done their mission, and then they're going to splash down, and here are the zones, and, the splashdown is the big news when it comes to crew recovery. But crew recovery teams also have to be prepared for launch, right? Sam, start that off for us.
Yeah, we're absolutely prepared on launch. So we actually have two separate teams. We have what's considered a return after fail to dock launch team, which is on standby during the launch mission operations, just in case something happens where if the capsule gets up to space and starts to rendezvous with the ISS, they encounter some kind of a difficulty and they're not able to dock the way they're supposed to, and they have to come back home. We kind of try and pick them up like we would any other mission to what we call a support area, where we have our NASA team members. If it's a SpaceX flight, our SpaceX team members would be there as well. If it's a Boeing flight, we would have our Boeing team with us. Gotcha. And we would pick them up like any other recovery mission.
Gotcha. Lily, I got the answer back, and they're already in the capsule.
Wow.
So you could have to go out and wave at 39A.
Yeah.
I was completely out of the loop on exactly where they were in that count. But
moving quick, I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's one sort of thing where they've gone all the way up. They're trying to, their mission, like with Axiom 2, they're trying to rendezvous with the International Space Station, and something goes wrong, right? This isn't the Expanse where, I don't know, open the airlock and hold your breath and dive into the other ship. Or that's not how this works, right? If something goes wrong and they can't dock, they would actually come back down out of orbit. Do they shoot for the normal recovery locations, or are there like backup recovery locations? How does that work?
Yeah, on a good day, we take them right back to a recovery location where we would normally be doing our returns to at the end of a mission. SpaceX has 7 different locations around the state of Florida, both in the Atlantic and the Gulf, which we consider supported sites where we can go pick them up after what is unfortunately would have been a shorter mission, something that they, something went wrong if we had to go get them this early. But otherwise, we'll pick them up from one of those locations at the end of their full mission and bring them back home.
Gotcha. And what if they're doing a launch? Because this is an important part of crewed launches. We never want to see it happen, but what if they're doing a launch and the launch has to be aborted in a situation where, there's a problem with the rocket and we need to get the crew off the top of the rocket safely? How do we recover them then? Because the area that they could be seems like it's a lot, controlled, it's understood because we know the trajectory, but where might that capsule come down? How do y'all prepare for that?
And Sam, you actually worked on the Mobile Launch Tower emergency egress system, right, too?
I did.
Yeah.
So, if we have something bad happen before they launch, we have ways to get them quickly out of the capsule and down away from what we call the blast radius or the blast area around the vehicle itself, so that the crew are away from any danger as quickly as possible. So that's if something happens before launch. But if something happens after launch, we absolutely know the trajectory that they're going to be following all the way up the East Coast and even across other countries as they enter into their orbit to meet with the International Space Station. So something could happen anywhere along those lines. We always hold our breaths and cross our fingers that doesn't happen. And so far, we've been really lucky. But if it does, we have the DET 3, which is Detachment 3 of the Department of Defense with 1st Air Force, on standby at 3 different locations around the country to be called in at a moment's notice to go get the crew if needed. So they can respond to anywhere around the country. They can respond to anywhere around the world and pick up our crews and make sure that they're safe.
Gotcha. So it's not like there's a ship right there and it's going to splash down next to the ship and the ship's there. That sounds like more of like you send a helicopter out first, or what's the first response if we don't have a ship sitting there?
So as soon as something happens, we would know about it because we're tracking this capsule super closely the whole time it's in launch. So we would hear about something bad happening. We would immediately tell our DET 3 counterparts. We would also make a general call out to, say, the U.S. Coast Guard, anybody close by to get there as soon as possible. But the DET has all this specialized equipment, things that are designed specially to be interacting with the capsule and to pull out our crew members. So if the Coast Guard were to respond first, as they probably would, just because they are all over the seaboard, they're surrounding the country, doing great work they would come up and kind of interact with the capsule, secure the area, make sure there's no other hazards involved, and make sure that everything's safe for when the debt do come.
Gotcha. So that's sort of like a commercial crew support sort of thing. Lily, is Artemis the same? Is it still, what would you say, Detachment 3? Is it the same sort of deal? Or how does Artemis sort of compare and contrast with the commercial crew?
So there's a lot of similarity, but some differences. So we also partner with the Det-3. Actually, we partner with the entire DoD, and we have requirements that we impose on them to help us with crew rescue. Our aborts are definitely different than commercial crew. Our paths obviously are different. We're going to the moon as opposed to space station.
Right.
We could abort at the pad. We could abort the crew, do an emergency egress at the pad, or we can do a launch abort with our launch abort system that's on top. That requirement, we know that where it will land, and so we have personnel from the DED and DoD stationed at Patrick Space Force Base who will go and rescue the crew. Our other aborts are could be anywhere in the Atlantic or the Pacific, in a incredibly different distances and areas. And like commercial crew, we rely on the DoD having forces stationed at 2 strategic points in the United States to be able to go get the crew. The other thing is that we are on alert. Unlike Sam, when she's on alert until docking, we are on alert until TLI, translunar insertion, plus 36 hours.
Wow.
So we wait until we know that they're on their way to the moon to tell the forces, okay, there's no aborts coming. And then we're back on alert when we're heading back from the moon to make sure that the forces are ready to support all crew rescue. And we're talking about, people in helicopters and C-17s that will jump off wherever wherever our crew lands, and we'll know where it is based on the trajectories and the information that we get from mission control. And so this is a very amazing, dedicated team, and we're very thankful that all of this was established by the commercial crew program first. We just have different distances that we have to cover.
Gotcha. You say different distances. I'm sitting here saying, like, well, some of those trajectories go over the middle of the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah.
It's a ways out there.
If you saw our abort map of where we could land, it's practically impossible for us to have a ship at every site that it could happen. So this is why we designed the capsule to be able to, after landing, give support capability to the crew up to 24 hours. So our requirement is to make sure that we get to the crew within 24 hours. So the crew can be in the capsule perfectly fine, just like they would in space. They have plenty of supplies to be in the capsule, can be powered up, and it can be active and transmitting information up to 24 hours.
Okay. Gotcha. We are going through all of this, y'all, and we're going to be taking some live Q&A here. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to hop off and start looking through the chat. If you have questions in chat, tag it. You know the drill. Like whichever way you're watching, put your question into chat. I'm going to grab some of those, and I'll hop back in a minute. But Alicia, can I turn the conversation over to you while I go and see if I can find some questions?
Absolutely.
All right.
All right. So, yeah, I mean, that's so interesting, hearing about your coordination with, the Department of Defense, and I assume the U.S. Navy as well, right? As a former aircraft carrier with the Intrepid, a naval ship, that's so much of our rich history as well. So it's such a cool just crossover, I think, that they've always been working together like that, and, still are to this day. So, props to everyone who's helping out with all of these very complicated systems that you all are working with. I'm really interested to hear about kind of the training that the crew has to go through also for all of this. I know, obviously, we can get into when it's actually splashing down and what they do in that process. But, even before that, was we were just talking about the potential for, an abort even at the launch pad. Do they go through training for that sort of thing as well? I would imagine it'd be different, right, than a splashdown situation. What is it like in case something goes, a little off nominal earlier even than that?
So I can talk about Artemis. We absolutely train with the actual crew when the vehicle is at pad before we ever get to our launch countdown. We will train with them emergency protocols, how to be able to get out of the ship as soon as possible, how to get to our baskets that are very similar to the shuttle, where they zip line down for emergency purposes, enter our vehicles and then leave the pad where the danger is. That's for a pad egress type of an abort. But we're responsible for training the crew and make sure that they know how to get out in an emergency situation if they land anywhere in the ocean during any kind of abort, and for nominal splashdown. So it's really fun to be able to be part of that. Let's put it that way. We actually get to take them out in the ocean with the Navy and do actually simulated splashdowns and rescue operations.
And same for commercial.
Commercial crew does the same thing. We make sure that the crew is very familiar with the launch pad, whatever their emergency egress system is at the launch pad they are launching from. So Boeing has a different emergency egress than SpaceX does. We make sure that they have a lot of familiarity with those systems. We also do something similar to Artemis, where we have unassisted water egress training days, where we put those crews into the SpaceX capsule, because SpaceX returns nominally to the water, where Boeing returns nominally on land. So we do this a little bit more frequently with SpaceX, where we have the crew train on how to open their hatches and get out into their flotation devices if they need to do so unassisted. Even before all of that, we have the crew train on centrifuge training, where they get to experience their launch, re-entry, and an abort profile for their specific vehicle, so that they have at least an idea of what to expect on the launch day, including if they have an abort type situation.
And centrifuge training is something they've been doing since the start of the space program as well, I know too, which is something very exciting if anyone has ever had a chance to go to, space camp or anything and experience that themselves.
Yeah, it is. Because we're going back to space flight in a capsule now, as opposed to shuttle, we're back to doing centrifuge training like we did in the beginning.
Amazing. That's amazing. And so I know we actually have a couple of videos. I think you actually got to go through some of this, right? With the airbags, in the water and everything like that. Can you tell us a little bit about what that experience was like?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a little bit different. That's actually helicopter training.
Oh, okay.
But I did get to go through centrifuge training. I was very fortunate to be a part of that team. And so I've ridden the profiles. We're finalizing our Boeing profile actually at the end of this month, which is really exciting, ahead of our crewed flight test, which is happening in late July of this year. So centrifuge training is really interesting. I've gotten to experience a launch, re-entry, and abort for the Boeing and SpaceX capsules, and it's quite a ride.
I can imagine. Lily, did you get a chance to experience that too? Do you get to go through the actual training?
I don't do the center. I don't want to do it. Let's put it that way.
Not for everyone.
I'm good. But we do have training where this simulates the entire landing. And the interesting thing is we take video and actual vibration loads that the unmanned missions had, because we had 2 unmanned Orion missions. So we have this set up at Houston that have it's pretty cool. You can sit just like you would in an astronaut, and you actually get to hear what it sounds like to come back to Earth, and you also get to feel that it shakes you. Of course, you don't get to feel the G's, and I'm perfectly okay with that. I think I'm too old now to be in one of those. I probably just throw up the whole way. But we're able to simulate our landing, and I think it's so cool to hear what happens in a landing. That to me was the most amazing part.
It's really neat too to hear that a lot of the Artemis protocols, I guess, were developed kind of based off of the commercial crew ones as well. Because I guess, like the idea of splashdown is still sort of the same idea.
Yeah.
It comes down, it slows down. You've got your parachute. Yeah. And then, of course, the splashdown into the water.
Yeah. Definitely the rescue part of getting the crew members out was definitely the foundation, even though we had done it at Gemini and in the future Apollo missions. It had been a long time since we had actually done manned operations after shuttle. And then we hadn't done rescue of crews until commercial crew started sending crewed. So we're very fortunate to be collaborators with the commercial crew program. We share a lot of the rescue hardware. But when it comes to rescue, that's definitely very similar in commercial crew. When it comes to the recovery, we couldn't be any different. We are totally different. We're coming back at different speeds. We have different asset requirements. The vehicle is bigger, heavier. And so that's totally different. And obviously Commercial Crew has two providers. One is lands on land, one on water, and ours is mostly water landing.
So let's talk a bit about those recovery vessels then, because like you said, very different sizes and shapes. And so with SpaceX, we've got these two much smaller, really kind of purpose-built ships, right? Or I don't, do you call it ships or boats? I know there's like a controversy with that too.
We call them recovery vessels.
Vessels, fine.
Right in the middle.
Safe. That's the neutral ground. So we have two very purpose-built, recovery vessels versus with the Orion capsule now too. Like we had the U.S.S. Portland. So again, we are using one of these large naval vessels to recover it. So is it just a matter of the capsules are just a lot larger, or they're not planning to be reused the same way? And how did that all kind of come about? Oh, there's that. There you go.
Apparently, this is the video we were trying to play. Sorry about that. We were looking at this here, and that hopped up again whenever it started to replay. We'll get back to that in a second.
So Sam, can you talk to us a bit about the recovery vessels that SpaceX uses for the Crew Dragons?
Yeah, absolutely. We have both Megan and Shannon, which are named after their first two female NASA astronauts who went up into space. We use that to kind of rendezvous with the capsule when it comes back into or back from orbit to land around the state of Florida. So we have a special agreement from the U.S. Coast Guard to have a little bit over 40 people on that vessel for specialized missions for NASA and for crew recoveries across the board. And that allows for our NASA teams and our SpaceX teams to be out there when the capsule is re-entering the atmosphere, watching it come down under its parachutes and land out in the water. Those vessels are just under 170 feet long. They both have A-frame type cranes that are used to lift the capsule out of the water to bring it back on board after re-entry. They also have fast boats and jet skis that are used to safe the vehicle when it first comes back, make sure there's no hazards around it, pick up all of our main parachutes and drogue parachutes to really be able to recover that for all the data that they hold from that reentry experience. They're great vessels. They're a lot of fun to be on. They do a wonderful job for our recoveries, and they've done every recovery, I think, up to this point.
That's awesome. Yeah, there's so many steps, I guess, in the recovery process. I know, looking through our collections too, of the recoveries, from the early days, they had things, like this locator dye they'd put in the water where it'd make it kind of this bright green so that you could see it from, up in the air in the helicopter. Do you guys still do anything like that? Or is it just, you've got drones now that can just find it immediately and,
We use beacons. I don't know about you, Lily. Do you use dye?
We use beacons. However, we do rely sometimes on the helicopters, the Navy helicopters, to mark the spot also, so that our vessels, our small boats can see where to head. Sometimes, based on the waves, on the horizon, you might not be able to see the capsule. So the helicopter does that for us. We are very far away at splashdown as a necessity, because Orion's totally different than Commercial Crew. We have a lot of debris, very dangerous debris, that falls as part of the parachute system deployment. And so I get asked this question a lot, because if you ever watch a SpaceX launch, they're almost right there as the capsule's coming down. We don't have that luxury. We have to be a certain distance away to protect not only the people who are going to be doing the recovery, but also the ships that are out there. So, it's a really good video of it coming down. And believe it or not, it's about almost 5 miles away. So, and we do deploy our small boats, that when we deploy them to go head over to the capsule, we can't do it until about a few minutes after it splashes down, because at that time, there's still a lot of debris coming down. And we need that. And the debris is produced because we're coming in at 25,000 miles per hour. When it comes into the orbit, we do skip reentry that helps slow it down to about 325 miles per hour. And then we do the whole entire sequence of parachutes and forward bay cover, jettison. so that it lands about 20 miles per hour. So it's a significant amount of debris that comes down when we're doing that. It's not going to hurt the capsule, but where we are positioned could hurt us.
Let me see. Can I get it while it's still in the air here? Yeah, here we go. A lot of people don't understand, like it's not so much the rest of the spacecraft, like the service module or anything like that, that's creating the debris. There are like little protective covers and stuff on the capsule, like covering up the parachute mortars. I don't know if that's the right term. But that stuff comes off and falls down below where the capsule is going to land, right?
Yeah. So, the heats that we're experiencing when we come back, we have to protect our parachutes are obviously on the top of the vehicle, and we have this ring that's called the forward bait cover. That forward bait cover protects all the main parachutes. You can't kind of see it in there. This is after splashdown, but
it goes up here, right?
Yeah, it goes up there. Perfect. And you kind of see these canisters that are empty. That's where the chutes were stuffed in. But before that happens, there's these 2 drogue chutes that deploy. Those drogue chutes are attached to the forward bait cover. Should deploy about 35,000 feet when it's coming down. And when it does deploy when the chutes deploy, it helps slow it down. And then at one point, the forward bait cover separates, paratypically separates from the capsule. Once it separates, now it's just a big 1,000-pound debris that's coming down on these small drogue chutes. And now you have your parachutes exposed, sorry, not explode. And then the main parachute, the main drogue chutes for the parachutes deploy, help it slow down even further. And then the main parachutes will come out at a certain height. And so we have the main drogue chutes that deploy, and also those canisters where the parachute's held has a lot of lids and these supposed that are very, very heavy, and they're like just coming at really high speeds, and we can't see them very well.
Yeah.
And they're very dangerous to personnel, and so we have a great system at this. We have this debris tool that helps us figure out the footprints of where to be or not to be. And that was all based on all the drop tests that we did before the Orion capsule ever launched. So
that the
go.
Bigfoot? There was there was something about Bigfoot. I remember when I was watching the return. That's what they call it, Team Bigfoot.
Yeah, so Sasquatch is our actual debris prediction tool, and so because of the footprints that it creates,
it's a footprint.
Yeah, it's a footprint. It really
is a Sasquatch footprint.
Yeah, and those footprints help us figure out. And by the way, the day we have the wonderful 45th Weather Squadron that comes with us on the ship, and they do real weather balloon data analysis that we use to put into this tool to give us amazing, accurate where everything's going to land. And I was looking at the data from Artemis I, and it was incredible how close we projected it to land and where it landed. It just gives more the people who build that software, they're geniuses, and the good thing is that we can rely on that tool when sometimes we can't see because we're landing at night. We'll know where everything falls generally in the area. So yeah, they have the best patch, Sasquatch patch.
Sasquatch patch.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it.
Real quick, I want to illustrate this for people because a lot of people don't understand how important this is. This one, the little upright balloons are on all the other shots I have post recovery, but we're talking about like these containers up here. You see these holes?
Yeah.
Normally there's a whole cover that goes up here over everything that's missing in this shot, right? But those big, you can see there's all sorts of little sort of holes, and those are almost like, I don't know, t-shirt cannons at a basketball game.
The cannons, humongous cannons that deploy our parachutes.
Yeah, and so those have the parachute sort of packed inside of them, and they have a cover on the outside to protect them while you're in space, right?
From the heat, of reentry.
Okay, from the heat of reentry. And then you need to get all that stuff out of the way so your chutes can release cleanly, right?
Yes. It's very different than obviously the commercial crew providers, and we have to figure out a way to protect them from the amazing heat that this vehicle gets exposed to, which is more than coming back from the space station.
Yeah, so you get over here into this, let's see, where is it? Okay, here we are. Like, pretend this is coming back, and we're jettisoning things off the capsule, right? Like this, and it's like falling down. The little covers and the bigger shroud, I think, would not go this way. Like, does it come off in pieces like a clamshell, or?
It just, there should be a video online. I'll try to send it to you later about what the cover looks like when it comes off. And just so you know, it lands a little bit before the CM lands.
Okay.
But all the other pieces of debris, we even have floating debris that could take up to 40 minutes for it to land. It's the very feather-like, the pieces of towel, pieces of mylar.
Yeah,
and
insulation.
So we need to take into account all of that stuff, which is very dangerous for helicopters to fly into, those floating debris.
Yeah.
But when all the big debris clears, this is about 3 minutes after splashdown. And so that very small floating debris is not harmful to our small boats because they have protective gear, but it's very harmful for helicopters. And so we have another tool that we put on the helicopters to help them navigate into the debris zone, and they know exactly what height to be at a certain time in splashdown, so that we can get them close while debris is still falling. And so we work with the Navy. Nav Air is the entity that approves all this stuff, and so it's pretty amazing the things that we had to think about and figure out how to resolve for us to go recover the capsule and the crew.
Yeah, people don't understand that. They're like, oh yeah, it just lands right next to the boat. I'm not going to draw a boat down here. That's a boat.
Go get it.
And it just lands right next to the boat, and then you just crawl up a ladder or whatever. Like, that's not how it works. You have the clearance zone because of all the little pieces that are sort of coming down, and then even when you drive boats into that area, you have to not worry, but you have to understand that there's stuff that can be in the water. You don't want to get tangled up in a line, even, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And after the vehicle splashes down, it's still powered up for a certain amount of time until we agree with mission control to bring down the main power down. When it's doing that, the vehicle is very harmful to all of our recovery forces, because we have a lot of hazards that are created from the vehicle from a commodity perspective, particularly ammonia, which is very deadly if you breathe it. So we have to wait a certain time until we can even approach the capsule. We have to stay away about 120 yards. If you looked at what happened during Artemis I, we had these flight test objectives, so we wanted to wait a couple hours and simulate that whole entire power being active for 2 hours to take some measures. And so people are like, why did you take so long to go get the capsule? Well, we expected to take that long to get the capsule because we couldn't approach it until flight control turned off the vehicle. And so once they did, we had the official handover to the NASA recovery director, and we went to go get it.
Well, ammonia is like a cleaning supply. Like, certainly you're not like cleaning the inside of the spacecraft with ammonia.
Very diluted. Very diluted. Yeah, it's 100%. And for us, and when you go and clean, it's very diluted.
Diluted ammonia.
Don't ever mix ammonia with bleach, obviously, as you know, even though they're very diluted. It's a bad thing. But 100% ammonia is incredibly deadly.
And that's for like a coolant system. Is it for cooling loops and stuff like that on the capsule?
It's used to help cool not only the avionics, but it's a thermal exchange with actually the cooling suits that the astronauts wear. So.
Gotcha. So you have like an ammonia or a thermal exchange. Maybe the ammonia.
Thermal exchange. There's water in the suit,
not ammonia.
The water heat gets exchanged at an exchanger with the ammonia system. It's a very similar thing that we do in station and shuttle. We use ammonia extensively in space.
Gotcha. So you don't want a recovery crew to go over there and get close to it, then a line is leaking ammonia or something like that and get sprayed in the face with ammonia, 100% ammonia, not cleaning ammonia, but that's...
Not cleaning them. Yeah. We hazardous checks, and Sam can tell you they do the exact same thing for their vehicle. You have to make sure you do the hazardous checks. You kind of do a pattern as you approach the vehicle to make sure that you don't we have equipment that's sensing. And before, as we're getting closer, the recovery forces are in protective gear to make sure, just in case, that they're not going to get exposed. Until we get that all clear, everybody's protected.
Gotcha.
Yep, we do that on every capsule. For our SpaceX landings, which I'm the most familiar with, we have specialized team members who are trained and in safety gear on fast boats, doing, like Lily said, sweeps around the capsule with those sniffers that are making sure you don't have any hypergolic fuels or any other types of hazardous commodities that could be leaking from the capsule that could impair our recovery efforts. And so they go around and around the capsule until they get up to it. They sniff all the little areas that are of particular interest, as well as the entire area of the capsule itself. They knock on the window, let the crew know that they're there. They're going to start hearing some noises, and that's when we start bringing our capsule back to the recovery vessel for lifting.
And in an ideal world, I know you said they could stay out there for example, like 24 hours. In an ideal world, what is the timeline of that from splashdown to actually when they get to leave the capsule? How long are they stuck in there for?
So for commercial crew, we have about an hour. So from the time they touch the water to the time they're out and doing medical assessments, it's about an hour.
And then for Artemis, our requirement is to get the crew to the ship's med bay within 2 hours from splashdown.
So not so bad. Not like they'd really need to bring, extra snacks or, and
they have them if they need them. Yeah,
they have them. Awesome. So Daz, I know you were grabbing some questions. Do we have any viewer questions we want to start?
I do. I have some viewer questions that we can get into here. And we've used the term sniffer, right? And y'all know what a sniffer is, but for the audience that doesn't know what a sniffer is, what does that mean? Like you got a dog out there that you're using to check to see if there's ammonia? Hopefully not.
No, of course not. And it's not a canary either back in the old days. No, we have a machine that specifically pulls in air. So they wave it around certain areas and it can pick up trace amounts of certain types of molecules. And so for us, we're mostly concerned about hypergols. Those are some of the things like ammonia that Lily was talking about, things that are really hazardous to people. Now, all the people who are doing that have protective gear, like she mentioned. They're wearing masks and covers, gloves, all of that good stuff. But these sniffers pull in the air. They analyze the air that they're pulling in for the molecules, the percent that they're getting. And if there's above a certain threshold or even a trace amount of a molecule we aren't expecting that's associated with a hazard, we back off and we implement a different set of operations.
Is that like a laser beam in the device, or is it like a little flame? And if the flame turns blue, it's this. Like how does it actually detect the minuscule amounts of hazardous gases?
It's certainly not a flame. I wish I could tell you. I haven't dug into that side of how that device works. I bet you the Department of Defense could tell you, and certainly our SpaceX counterparts and our Boeing counterparts, but I'd have to dig into that one a little bit more to tell you the exact mechanics of it.
Gotcha.
So
we just know it works.
Provide that sensor at Artemis. Yeah, it's literally a big device that has at the end, like she said, an ability for air to be ingested. And then there's think of it as a device that figures out the chemical composition of things. And so it's set to alarm when a certain parts per million of a certain chemical react. It will go off in an alarm. And so we set it to specific values, and it's sensing it. And we like to see zero.
Right.
That's what we like to see. Yeah.
But that's the important thing. Like, that there are hazardous materials, consumables inside the spacecraft, and that there's a potential for those to leak. Or in some cases, I don't know, on either of these capsules, are they intentionally vented, like Soyuz?
We vent ammonia, and that's the problem. We, while the vehicle's powered up, we're venting ammonia on purpose. And so in space, that's not a problem, but on Earth, it is a problem if you're going to be near the vehicle. We actually, when we have the vehicle powered up, during processing here at Kennedy Space Center, where we do ammonia venting sometimes, and we actually at the venting port we install a hose so that it gets sent outside through scrubbers, and it's not going to harm anybody. But we don't have that luxury out in the water. We have to wait until the vehicle is powered down so it stops venting ammonia. Now,
Gotcha.
Hypers. And when it comes to hypers, we don't expect hypers to be leaking. That would be a contingency scenario. The vehicle has so many fault tolerance type valves to make sure that we don't release hypers after it's landed. But of course, we're always checking to make sure that nothing got damaged on splashdown and created accidental leaks of any of the commodities.
Makes sense. Sam, you were like nodding along and shaking your head when we're talking about releasing things. How's the SpaceX capsule different?
Yeah, our commercial crew partner vehicles are a little bit different. We don't intentionally vent anything. So when we're doing our sniffer checks, it's really to make sure that there's nothing that, like Lily mentioned, nothing off nominal has happened, nothing has been broken, or something didn't happen during reentry and splashdown to have those commodities leaking in the area. So a little bit different there.
Gotcha. Okay, makes sense. Alicia, keep going. I'm going to get some more questions here.
Sure. So we've got, these sniffers, we've got all these, things out in the water. And then what happens? So I know I've seen a lot of boats that come there. There's like clips that they have to attach on them. Can you kind of walk us through like what's the next step for each of these capsules now? How do you get them to where they need to go?
Yeah, absolutely. So for SpaceX, once we've done those sniff checks and kind of knocked on the capsule to say, hey, your recovery forces are here, we're going to be bringing you onto the ship, they slowly start to attach, like you said, some straps around that vessel, around the capsule to bring it over to the vessel. They do a slow tow, and the recovery vessel is also meeting them in the middle to get to the area where the A-frame on that recovery vessel can be lifted, can be used to lift the capsule out of the water onto what we call the nest of the recovery vessel. And so they sit it down, this capsule, this egg-shaped marshmallow, which is what it looks like once it's come back.
We love
it's like a toasty marshmallow. And they sit it in a nest, which is a padded ring that allows the capsule to sit very comfortably and upright with a lot of support. And then they translate that nest with the capsule on it over to our Egress platform, where they do another set of hazardous sniff checks to make sure that we didn't miss anything while we were in the water. Nothing has changed during those operations to bring it to where it is now. And then they start opening the hatch to egress the crew.
I got the nest there labeled correctly, right?
Yes, you do.
So that's the nest, and then let me show this because it's sort of here in the picture. But you said they translate that, right? And it looks like there's some rails here or something. Like these things here almost look like little slide guides or rails or something. And they sort of use the crane to pick it up and put it in the nest, and then the nest like slides across the deck over to where it's not, hanging off the back when the astronauts get out. Did I get that right?
Yeah, you did. We use a pulley system to slowly translate it across the deck. Okay. And then it interfaces with the Egress platform, which is where we start our hatch opening operations.
It's like a tow truck.
That's right.
It's like a tow truck, but you're in the car when it picks it up onto the, it's like pulls it up with a winch onto the back. You don't get to stay in it. You get out of your car before that happens, but it's basically a tow truck for space capsules.
That's right.
Bit of a stretch.
Yeah. And from what we saw with the Orion recovery, then a little bit different. They don't really kind of lift it out and stick it on a nest in the same way. This sort of kind of bobs and floats into the well deck of the ship, right?
It does. So we're a little bit different. We do not get the crew out after we recover the capsule. We get the crew out before we recover the capsule. So we'll do it in open water. The small boats, which are staffed, let's put it that way, with Navy divers who are trained to be able to open Orion and help the crew get out. And then we'll transport the crew from the open water via helicopter and as a backup via the small boats. We do use, the LPD ship that you saw for Artemis I was called Portland, but they have several LPD ships that we can use with the Navy to help us eventually get the capsule in. Our capsule is bigger, heavier. It does absorb water after landing, and so you just got to take into account all the extra weight that it takes on after it splashes down. We could lift it if we wanted to as a contingency scenario, but we would need a very large crane ship out there to go get it. The LPD ship was chosen not just because of its capability to get the crew module in safely and slowly into the well deck. One of the objectives of the first test flights was to ensure we did not damage the heat shield. We needed to inspect and make sure that we know how the heat shield behave. The first time we've ever done a skip reentry procedure was Artemis I. And so it was incredibly important to not set this capsule on anything like that. Plus it's heavy. And so there are interface points that we can set the capsule to, but it's very easily to be able to do that in the well deck. The other thing is that the good thing about the LPG ship is that it provides basically a hospital with us. We take it with us, and the DoD helps provide that kind of medical care. We could potentially land on a nominal landing, and the landing all depends on the trajectory of the day of launch. So the day of launch, we have a good idea where we're going to land. But we have these alternate weather sites that we could potentially land away from that site that we have to go and protect. We could be 1,200 nautical miles away from the coast of America. And so if you think about being able to take care of the crew in case they're incapacitated, they were hurt, or they need medical trauma support, we have to bring that with us. And so because there's no hospital in the middle of the Pacific. And so this is why we partner with the DoD, and we are so grateful to the Third Fleet at the Pacific. They have been incredible team members, and we're actually co-lead the operation. And we're so thankful that they allow us to have one of their assets for all of our recovery operations, and the support that they gave us is just outstanding.
That's amazing. And also just to kind of go back, you mentioned the divers. I feel like this is something we have to talk about. and Das, I know you probably know what I'm about to say too. So something that whenever anyone's watching, at least, a SpaceX recovery mission there, we have this like ninja diver who is always out there and climbs up areas on top of the toasty marshmallow. And everyone's, ooh, the diver. And then he jumps off the side, and everyone thinks it's just the most fun thing ever. Can you tell us about the diver?
It is a lot of fun.
Same exact thing for Artemis. We actually have to get on top of the vehicle, and when we do our training sessions, we have pictures of them. They get up, and then when they want to come down, they don't use the ladder. We have a ladder for them to get up, but when they do rescue, they're not going to use a ladder. They want to rock climb it up there, and they like to jump off of it when they're done with their job up on top. And you can kind of see the ladder that we use. It's the exact same thing, in SpaceX, recovers her capsule. Those are SpaceX employees, I believe, that do all that operation. For us, it's actually the Navy divers branch of the military that does all of that. And we train them at Naval Base San Diego. We train with them out in recovery operations when we go out with the LPD ships for training. And they also come over to a neutral buoyancy lab at JSC where we train them also. And they love being part of the recovery operations. So to them, it's just, one of the fun things that they get to do. They're like, I'm not shooting or having to worry about anything. I'm here recovering a capsule. So they love working with us.
Yeah, so that is a SpaceX employee. That's right in that picture, jumping off of that toasty marshmallow. And a lot of the guys who do the rigging, which is why they're up there, all those straps and cables that you see are attached by those SpaceX employees. A significant number of them used to be pararescue jumpers with the military. And so they also have a lot of that historic, expertise from their time doing those jobs or on loan from those jobs. And so just like Lily said, they love to be able to jump off that capsule. And in training, they do the same thing. So it's always a fun part of our recoveries to see them jump off, to see how far they can get. And just another piece of the fun.
Yeah, they won't let me do it.
Let you do it, nice.
They won't. They're like, no, Lily, you can't do it. I asked for so many things, like, can I jump off the ship? Can I just do this? Or like, can I go on the small boats? Like, no, you're the only recovery director. You cannot do this. And I'm like, okay, my last day at work, you better let me do it.
It's just like a field day to get caught up on all the things you couldn't do as critical personnel, I guess, right?
They have so much fun. Yeah.
It looks like it. Definitely. I know everyone always loves to watch that. And it's like the diver. Yeah. Kind of makes you wonder, like, was it originally when you guys were first coming up with the whole procedures, like, was he supposed to just kind of climb down and like leave, or Was it like, just get off the thing? And he's just like, oh, I'm just going to jump. Great.
To my knowledge, I think they were always just happy with jumping. They're out in open water. We've got a lot of safety vessels in the area. And they're like, no, this is faster. We can just jump.
Yeah, absolutely. Why not? That's the perks of splashdown, right? I mean, I guess if somebody were jumping off of, a Soyuz capsule in the middle of the desert, that might hurt a little bit more if they were landing, on the ground.
Yeah, a little bit.
A little bit. So all right, so it's been pulled into the well deck, it's been pulled onto the ship, so now we've got kind of the crew, at least for the SpaceX ones, coming out, right? So I know, like, the historical photos we have at Intrepid of Scott Carpenter coming off, he literally was just kind of like, hanging out, and they brought him in and he's off the helicopter just walking around on our flight deck. I think I actually have a picture of that I gave you, Dust. But he's just walking around like it's no big deal. I think actually there was another picture of him wearing just like cons, like whatever. I'm so curious now, like they really take this very seriously now. They don't let them stand up, really. I guess they come out and you see them on stretchers. They're like not able to stand up and walk. Oh, there he is.
Did I get the right one?
Carpenter at the Intrepid, yeah.
It's good because when I need to get an Intrepid photo, I just look for the black and white ones and I'm good.
Oh, there you go. We're all labeled Intrepid too. But yeah, I love that picture. Look at his shoes. He's just like, he's one of us, no big deal.
Well, for the Intrepid, they were coming back from very few days out on orbit. When Sam recovers her crew, they've been on space for over 6 months, and they're very conditioned. And you definitely don't want them to come out and harm themselves. So they're very strict about how they come out. And we have the same thing, even though we're going to, Artemis II is a 9 to 10 day mission here from the NASA docks. And I think there's a certain day where now it doesn't matter if you're there for 6 months or 9 days, you're now deconditioned. So they expect them to be deconditioned at a certain time.
We call it long duration missions because they're up in 0G for so long. They're not really used to the feeling of gravity. And recovery, re-entry into the atmosphere and splashdown is a pretty dynamic event. So not being used to having any gravity on you and then kind of falling down to the earth, being under parachutes, feeling that rocking back and forth, and then splashing down in the ocean where you have a very minimum wave state, but you're sensitive to all of those new sensations that you haven't had in a long time. When we do our egress of the crew, which is taking them out of the capsule, we are very careful to have them onto the litters or the stretchers that you see here, just so that they have a little extra time to get used to being under gravity again.
I can imagine that's a very disorienting feeling. And yeah, just, of course, the gravity is different. It's going to take a while for your muscles to get used to just normal Earth gravity as well.
You never know how the crew's going to react. Some of them come back and they're like up and at it. They're jumping around. They're ready to go. And others need a little bit longer.
It's onto a vessel as well, like out on the ocean. Like when you're in space, not only do you not have gravity, but you're hopefully capsule shouldn't be rocking in the waves, right? That shouldn't be a thing. And then you come down here and it's not only, now there's gravity, the deck is moving underneath you.
Very gentle. We have very restrictive requirements to make sure that the wave states are very low, the winds are very low, so that we're bringing them down into a very calm environment. But anything different from what you've been in for the last 6 months, will kind of change up your gyros and make you have to work a little bit harder to keep your balance.
Makes sense.
So Sam has very constraining, like she said, they usually are very flat when they come in. Unlike Artemis, when we come back from the moon, we're coming back and that's it. SpaceX and Boeing can delay their return based on what the weather conditions are. So they can literally wait until those conditions are better. Once we come back from the moon, we have about 4 to 5 days of trying to understand what that weather looks like. And, Artemis 1, we were supposed to land about 38 nautical miles from San Diego, and we can land and recover the crew up to 6 feet waves. And we were about 4.5 for Artemis 1. And we actually had to go find, if you can imagine our weather maps right before we made the decision where it was going to land, it was all red, like you can't land here. And then a little tiny spot of green. God. That was it. It was like, that's where we're going. It was 300 nautical miles away. So it took us an extra day to get back. And so for when we do Artemis II, the crew can land in sea state conditions and we could be recovering them up to 6 feet. And I tell you what, that's why we get them out in the open water, so they're not bobbling for so long. Those poor guys.
I can imagine. Yeah, hopefully they don't get seasick. Although a lot of people are from the Navy, so I would assume a lot of astronauts have Navy, history. So I assume that hopefully they have their sea legs.
Artemis II, we have 2 Navy astronauts, and then we have a Canadian, and then a non-military crew person. But I think that they're used to it. And the good thing is that we're going to bring them out with us to train with us, so they'll get used to what it's like.
So can you actually tell us a bit about that? I know you've got coming up what would you say, the underway, the Artemis II underway tests in July, you mentioned, right?
Yeah. So we have 3 underway recovery tests, URTs, scheduled to happen before Artemis II. So our first one's URT 10. It's scheduled currently right now at the end of July. This is actually the first time that we'll have our very high fidelity trainer. It's called the CMTA. That he was showing a picture of what it looked like before. The CMTA, also affectionately called Vader.
Yes, I get it. It kind of looks like it, right?
Yeah.
Vader
helmet. And it behaves like Vader. It's very temperamental. And so this is actually the first time that we're going to be taking it out into the open ocean. We have taken it out here at Kennedy Space Center. And so the difference between this trainer and the trainer that we used prior to Artemis 1 is that this is, you can actually put people inside of it. It operates just like the CMTA does. This is us flipping it over, testing our manual uprighting systems. But you can... you have all the lights and you actually have high fidelity instrumentation panel that you can actually turn buttons on and off. And so we're really looking forward to it. It's really interesting because we all want to be the subjects for URT 10. We're going to train the crew on URT 11, which is not till spring of next year, but everybody wants to be the subjects during URT 10. But we agreed for the first time that we'll ask the Navy to be the subjects, because we're scared people are going to throw up inside the Vader, and then we'll have to stop our operations and take our time to clean it up. So we're going to rely on the professionals to do it for this time, but later on we'll have the crew, and then we'll have NASA subjects.
Is that the one? Hang on, is this the? Let's see here.
Yeah, that's it.
There you go. So were you christening it Vader? Is that
you have to christen every vessel, and so Vader is actually technically an approved vessel. We had to design it like you would any marine vessel, and so we felt that it was important to make sure for good luck that we christen it, and so we christened it with the name Vader. And so this was the ceremony that we actually got a champagne bottle that you would normally have in a christening ceremony. We hid a piece of it that was not really Vader, just to make sure we didn't damage Vader. And so it was pretty cool. And we had a good time. We celebrated that. It was the first day we put her in the water. So
that's amazing. And it's true. That is a time-honored naval tradition. Das, I gave you a picture for the Intrepid.
Yes, I have it. Here we go.
Pull that one up.
How's that?
There it is. All right. This is Helen Smith Hoover, the wife of a Navy admiral. And she is smashing a bottle of champagne just like that against the U.S.S. Intrepid in 1943. Had to include that.
A lot cleaner back then, Alicia. Like the hull was a lot cleaner.
Well, yeah. I mean, it was also not. It was in dry dock, I think, at that point too. But but there you go, 1943. Just in 2023, same thing. Although not named Vader. That's so cool. It's named Vader. I love that so much.
Yeah, if you look at it, it looks just as Darth Vader. In fact, we have a sticker on it of a Darth Vader sticker, and we're like, are we gonna get in trouble with Disney? And no, they're perfectly fine with it because it's V.A.D.E.R. So it's technically not Vader, but we do have a sticker on it. I don't think you can see it on that by the hatch. And that's the area we're going to start. Everybody wants to put their own stickers on the Vader. We're like, sure. So we're going to have Navy stickers, and every time we have crew members, we'll put their stickers on. So
I'm looking for the sticker. I don't think I have the sticker anywhere.
Does the V.A.D, does that actually, like, do you have an acronym for that? Does it?
Yeah, we do. And
of course we do.
Ask me that. Vehicle Advanced Demonstrator for Emergency Rescue. I believe that's what it was called.
And you came up with that after the fact, right? Admit it. You came up with it after the fact, right? Because you just wanted to.
It was From the moment that we were fabricating it and putting it together, one of our project engineers and managers, this amazing guy who was in charge of getting Vader done. He, from the minute, he's like, I'm calling this thing Vader. It behaves like Vader, acts like Vader, it looks like Vader. And so everybody just started calling it Vader. And so there was no other name that we could christen it with except for Vader. So we all had to come up with an acronym for it. And so I had a lot of help for that.
It just stuck, huh? Hey, real quick.
Yeah.
Speaking of stickers, you were talking about the Vader sticker, but we were also talking about having a capsule that you can train on that simulates the real capsule, but it doesn't cost as much as a real capsule, I'm going to guess. There are more than just the Vader stickers on this. Like, these are stickers, right?
Yeah, so those, because we actually don't have a propulsion system or, the interface where the rocket interfaces to the ground. These are all stickers simulating that. And so when we train the divers, and we talked about approaching it and doing hazards checks, those are those areas that we're doing hazards checks on. The window is definitely very similar to the capsule. And the hatch is very similar from what it feels like, even though the mechanisms are a little different. How the divers open it is very similar to the capsule, and how it feels is very similar to the capsule. But we don't need all this extra equipment to be able to open and close the hatch. It does, Artemis capsule does have a top hatch also, very similar to what commercial crew does, which is our secondary path to getting the crew out if we need it. And so Vader also has a top hatch that we simulate. This is actually Artemis 1, is it? I can't tell. Yeah, Artemis 1 Artemis 1 did not have a hatch on top. It was kind of a weight-saving thing. We didn't have a crew. But Artemis 2 will. This is the first time we'll have the top hatch. And Artemis 3 will have a docking port on top because we're going to be docking to the Starship for our lunar lander.
There. Can I just say hatch goes here?
Perfect. It was pretty cool. We talked about that diver going up there. He's knocking on the window saying, "Can you see me?" So
okay, gotcha. I saw one that had the top of it, and so I brought it up because you can see the top of the thing there. But I'll just add my own hatch.
That's it.
Awesome. So it's going to be docking. I mean, so you've got Artemis 2, the underway recovery test coming up in July. I assume that will be streamed and, we'll be able to see that maybe. Is it going to be the same kind of process then as what Artemis 1 was, but then plus having people in it that you'll have to go through that simulation of bringing them off and everything like that?
So it's a little bit different than Artemis 1. First of all, Artemis 1 was a very long mission. And so the capsule was out there doing all kinds of testing, making sure the systems to be able to maneuver the capsule, our comm, worked very well. It actually did a loop, like a couple orbits around the moon. Artemis 2 is very similar to what Apollo 8 was. So it would go really slingshot around the moon and come back. And the main purpose of Artemis 2 is to now test the crew systems that we did not have on Artemis 1. We want to make sure those all work before we actually go and land on the moon. And so part of the first, after we launch and go to orbit, one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to simulate a docking scenario with the upper stage of the SLS. We're obviously not going to dock to it, but we're going to simulate like we're docking just to make sure that we can control the vehicle and the crew can control the vehicle to eventually do the Artemis 3 docking to the lunar lander when they arrive at the moon orbit and the lander's there waiting for them. It's a very short mission, Artemis 2. It's 9 to 10 days as opposed to what Artemis 1 was.
Right.
Which makes recovery very hard, actually. Makes it a little harder because we had the luxury of a launch and waiting about 20-something days before we recovered the vehicle, so we had time to train. We literally, as soon as we launched, we had to go to Naval Base San Diego and work on getting ready to go recover the vehicle.
That is so exciting. And then Sam, with with your recoveries then too, with everyone coming in, what are you looking forward to now in terms of like the future of the commercial crew program and any sort of changes with any of your capsules? Is there anything on the horizon?
Oh, yeah, we have a lot of stuff coming up. So CFT is Boeing's first crewed flight, the crewed flight test, which is happening at the end of July. They'll be launching up to the International Space Station, docking, and hanging out there for a couple days before coming back and doing a recovery as their last test flight before they get into certified flights. So once they successfully complete the crewed flight test, we'll be flying with them just as regularly as we're flying with SpaceX. So we'll be having ideally 2 commercial crew flights a year, one Boeing, one SpaceX, all up to the International Space Station.
And can you share with us any recovery things that'll be going on with that? Because the capsule's, going to look a little different. Obviously, you can't stick it on the nest the same way. Can you share any of that with us?
Yeah, I absolutely
is it developed or?
Yeah, absolutely. And they were able to successfully perform recovery operations for their 2 previous flights, OFT-1 and OFT-2, which were the orbital flight test flights for the Boeing Starliner capsule. They simulated recovery operations as if there were crew in there, but there were not. This will be their first crewed test. So that capsule lands out in the desert in the Midwest, in the middle of nowhere, to make sure that we're safely away from all residential communities, anywhere where people would be. And they do it very differently from how SpaceX or even Artemis would, because it's landing on land, almost more similar to how a Soyuz capsule would land, because they also land on land. So their capsule comes down under drogue chutes and main parachutes, just like the other 2. And then they land in the desert and they do the same type of sniffer tests, but they get to walk around it instead of having to be on a boat. And then they cover the capsule to make sure that they can keep air cooling to that vehicle, because it's in the middle of the desert, which is very warm or very cold, depending on what time you're coming down and what time of year. So to make sure that we have environmental controls for the crew. And then we set up what equates to some scaffolding and start doing very similar crew egress style operations, where we pull the crew out, we move them over to, for them, a mobile med bay. For SpaceX, it's a med bay on the recovery vessel. And we start doing med checkouts before we put them in a helicopter to take them back to an airport, where we also hand over any of the cargo that's coming back from the International Space Station, and where we do what's called baseline data collection science, which is a series of experiments and research science to basically assess how the crew is responding to being back in gravity after being in 0G for so long.
Fascinating. Well, gosh, we can't wait to see all of this stuff coming up. There's so many exciting things coming up to watch.
I can't wait to see that launch. It's going to be really exciting.
Yeah, it'll be a good one, I think.
Definitely. Das, do we have any other questions?
We have lots of questions here. I was actually squinting at my other monitor trying to get some Starliner stuff here to show. But we have lots of different questions. Let me grab some of these real quick. I have way too many windows open today. Let's see here. There was a question asking, Is there any process, or do you just avoid it if I'm not even on the camera right now. Whatever. Nobody needs to see me. Is there any process if you have the crew come down unexpectedly in another country? Do you just avoid doing that at all? Are there international partners? Is it always, the water? Or how does that work, I guess? Lily, how does that work? Do we just have friends that, we landed in your country and we can pick up the capsule from here?
Yeah, so we actually have to think about that and make sure that we're prepared for that. Obviously, we have the military supports us, the State Department supports us if we do land somewhere where we're not supposed to be at. But most of our aborts landings are in international waters, and it's we will deploy the rescue forces to get to them as soon as possible. But if we have an abort or they land when they're not supposed to, we rely on the military to help us get the nearest vessel there as soon as possible. And that could be a commercial a vessel that is in partnership with the network of rescue, or it could be a military vessel. So we work in conjunction with the military and prepare for those kind of scenarios. And we work with the State Department on the highest levels of NASA to make sure that we have those partnerships in place if we do land somewhere where we're not supposed to be.
And that's part of like when we launch our rockets, they go out over the water, right? So it's not like we, I don't know, launch them down into Mexico right away from, that'd be a really weird trajectory. Maybe Vandenberg could do it, right? But we launch out of the water. So early in the flight, like when we're really sort of getting up that big hard, like I'm going to say the hardest part, clearly lots of hard parts, but we're over the water for most of that time, right? Mm-hmm. And then once you get in orbit, where we talked about both a situation where, maybe a Dragon capsule or a commercial partner capsule, a spacecraft was around the ISS, it's in space, then you can sort of determine when it deorbits. So you can aim at a spot. And the same thing, like, I guess coming back from the moon, we have the entire trajectory and all the burns and everything. Like, we can control where that capsule is supposed to come down. That's, like, sort of part of the plan, right?
We can control the final location in case of weather. But when it's coming back from the moon, it's coming back from the moon. And so also there could be issues during the reentry where we could have, and this could happen for commercial in Soyuz, and it has happened in Soyuz before, where you could come in, instead of your normal entry interface, you have a ballistic interface or a direct, which means that you're farther away than your planned launch. This is why we have the rescue forces from the military on alert when we're coming back from landing, so that we can deploy those assets as soon as we know that we're going to be in an off-nominal event. Of course, we're going to be out in the Pacific on a nominal event, and if for some reason they splash down, like it happened with the Intrepid having to go get the astronaut carpenter out where they weren't expecting to, we would call up whatever assets nearby, and we would go to them also to go recover the capsule. Artemis is a little different, is we do rely on the DoD for the rescue off nominal, but we are responsible also for the recovery of the capsule. Commercial crew, I believe Boeing and SpaceX are responsible for their capsules after the crew is out. So it's a little different.
Yeah, that's true. We partner with the DoD similar to how Artemis will to go and rescue our crew members. But we also have things like the first responder checklist, which is like a quick look cheat sheet that we would send out if somebody was responding to the capsule who hadn't been trained, like another country's military or another country's fire or police station, something along those lines, depending on what happened. But we've also engaged some of the countries that are along our launch trajectories to say, hey, there's a super low likelihood of this happening, but if it does, can we work with you to respond? And we've had really good partnership with them.
Nice. Das, where'd you go?
Oh, I disappeared. Sorry, I was going to get another question. There were a couple comments in here. A lot of people are very interested in the sniffers, as it turns out, like whether it's ion spectrometry or a mass spectrometer type of device. And I'm like, I don't know.
I need to get information for you guys. So
we can get you some info and send it to you later for sure.
That would be fantastic, because I have like half of my questions are detailed specifications on the sniffers.
Oh, okay.
Oh goodness.
So
we end up in this rabbit hole.
Somebody else also said the next capsule for Artemis needs to be called Skywalker. I don't know if you could come up with that acronym, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of reference. As you know, we in NASA love all kinds of space movies and stuff, but there's a lot of Star Wars reference in Artemis for sure.
People telling me that I did a good job of drawing a hatch on top, but it would be hard to get out of the hatch that I drew. That's not a thing. Let's see here. Alicia, how you doing?
I'm good. Are you looking for questions?
I am. I'm looking for questions that are not detailed things that we've already sort of gone over.
Oh, gosh. Amazing. Okay.
We could talk a little bit about how the recovery starts. I think from Artemis and the commercial crew program, that's a little bit different. For SpaceX, we fly out on a helicopter out to the recovery vessel. Our teams leave from an airport and take a helicopter out to the vessel during our recovery missions because they're out in the water. And if we were going to stay on that vessel the whole time, we'd be out there for days, which I think is what the Artemis team does. You guys are out on that aircraft carrier for a couple days prior to recovery, right?
It depends on the weather. So what happens is, because I told you we have to cover 1,200 nautical miles, we have to kind of be at the midway point at a certain time so that we can cover that 1,200 nautical miles north and south until the weather, situation gets more credible. Because, when we come back from the moon, we have weather projections about what it's going to be, but you don't really know until the day of what it's really going to be. We try to be at the landing site about 24 hours before splashdown. So we will have made a decision of where they're going to land 24 hours before. Now, one of the things that we do that not a lot of people knew in Artemis I is we do just-in-time training with the Navy. These underway recovery tests are to train not just the Navy, but the NASA personnel. But eventually, we don't know what ship we're going to get for the splashdown over Artemis. So we do what we call a just-in-time training of 2 to 3 days, where we go out with the ship and simulate a splashdown, go to a full mission profile with the military. That's extremely valuable for the military and us to make sure that we're ready for the day of splashdown. So we actually spent a good 4 days out before splashdown Artemis 1, and then we came back to port, got rid of our trainer, and then waited for the splashdown. And then we had to deploy about 5 days before. We deployed about 4 days before to get to this landing site. So it's quite a nice cruise. The military definitely makes it fun. You can imagine what the sleeping conditions are. It's just like being on a Navy ship. I ended up enjoying it at the end. I slept so good, but you're really going into these little bunk beds, and you have a little curtain to help you black out any whatever you can. But the ship makes noise all night long. It's not like a cruise ship, it's not as stable as it can be. They don't really need that. So if the waves are high, you feel it.
Yeah, really different from our recoveries. I think we're out on the vessel 6 hours before splashdown, and our teams are out there for, I think, 4 hours after splashdown, and then we're all back on land. So it really doesn't take more than 12 hours for us, which is really nice because we don't have to worry about bunking or anything along those lines. I will say the SpaceX chef does a really great job for meals, though. So it's always a treat when we get to eat on the recovery vessel because they are very good at what they do.
These little perks that you don't even think about,
The little perks. It's like going out to dinner on the recovery vessel.
It's a nice, evening dinner cruise. Why not?
Yeah, I wish. It's more along the lines of where can you fit in a bite here or there. You have mission operations ongoing around you. But we find ways to make it fun.
But we found ways not to miss our food, because if you didn't go get something to eat when it was time to go get something to eat, you were out. You weren't getting any food. And I would say that everybody scared me before I went on the ship and said, the food's really bad. And I was actually surprised. It was pretty good. And we had, I think one night we celebrated and had lobster and steak. And so I can't complain. The Portland really took care of us.
Well, again, it is a very special occasion for them. I mean, it like you were saying, I'm sure they all are so excited to be part of that. I know, again, just to reference Intrepid, they issued special postcards and they had a special, party for them. It's such a cool, unique experience that they get to witness history, first of all, and also just to have astronauts on board and have capsules on board, at least.
Yeah.
Really.
Did we mention the cake?
The cake, exactly.
Yeah.
They made a cake.
We had to wait a whole day because we went so far away for Artemis. So we it took us a little longer to get back to port. And so we spent a whole entire day before port just taking pictures. Everybody just came and got pictures with the capsule. And, it's really interesting. And one of the fun things to do with the Navy team is, you can switch hats with them. You can, I think I got a couple sweaters from the DoD. I gave them some of my NASA gear. They gave me their gear. And so there's a lot of coin trading, patch trading. We actually sold a lot of NASA memorabilia. We're allowed to do some of that, and they love getting it. And I think I spent a significant amount of money just buying shirts for some of the crew of the Portland, because I know that some of the very young people who probably don't have a lot of spare change, and so I just wanted to reward them. And yeah, it's so worth it.
That's so nice. That's so nice. Yeah, I know. So we have Fleet Week coming up actually next week, this coming week, next week, this weekend, where we have visiting ships that come in that port, park right near us. And yeah, they always are selling their, their challenge coins and all their memorabilia as well. So we always try to support them too, which is always so fun with the Navy ships.
There
you go.
Crew. Challenge coin.
Oh yeah.
NASA loves their challenge coins. I know. I always have like those too.
Them.
I gotta show you mine because I needed to get my own challenge coin after learning all of this. This is my new one. So let me see where it goes. So this is the landing recovery director one. It has our caps, and then in the back it's got the LPD ship and all the military sources. So yeah, we love trading coins. I got quite the collection now.
So fun. Oh my gosh. Cool. That's all right. So any other questions?
I have a quick one, real quick. Wait, no, that's about the recovery fleet. Anyways, I had to ask Gavin if we could use screenshots because I didn't have any photos of the ships, the recovery ships. But anyways, Gavin said we could hop over here and look at Shannon and Megan real quick because there's all sorts of really cool photography of the recovery vessels. But that's not actually what I was meaning to show here. What I was meaning to show was a question about the swim training. So if you are training to go out there, is it just normal, yes, I can swim training, like you have to do, I don't know, if you go on a whitewater rafting trip? Is there special training? I mean, I think we were talking about that, not just swimming, but getting out of a helicopter and stuff, right?
Yeah, we have very specialized training associated with the SpaceX recoveries because we're taking helicopters over water to get to these recovery vessels that are out in the ocean by the splashdown sites. So we do what's called helicopter underwater egress training, where they put a life vest around you. They strap you into a seat, put you into what looks like the cavity of a helicopter. They drop you into the water, flip you upside down, and you have to escape or egress from the helicopter that is simulating having landed on water, flipped upside down and in an off nominal situation. So the idea here is when helicopters land in water, they're very top heavy. So they almost always automatically flip upside down. And we're always strapped into seats. We always have our life vests with us, and we have little tiny pony bottle type scuba tanks with us that we can use. God forbid this should happen. But we train in case so that you have some experience to fall back on if you should find yourself in this situation. And it's pretty dynamic stuff. You end up with a lot of water up your nose. You do this several times. And it's a fun day for training for a bad scenario.
No kidding.
We have the same requirement. Any of our now personnel that go into military helicopters has to have this training. I think that was done commercially, but we actually have the military trainers, which is way worse.
Which is worse.
Yeah, we would rely on
first. I think that's a commercial company, but I'm trying to get that training through the commercial company instead of the military.
Yeah, we had ex-military NASA specialists in crew rescue and any type of personnel rescue set up this training with Rely on New Tech over in Houston, Texas. And so we go over there to their pool. We do a half day in the classroom where they train us on all the information. And then we go get wet in the pool where they train us on the scuba tanks and our life vests, which is what you saw me pulling. I always wanted to do that. You see these life vests where they explode out when you pull the string, and it's like that big red button, you're not supposed to press it, but you really want to. So this was great because we actually got to press the button or pull the strap and have those life vests deploy with us. So it was a lot of fun. That's me there on the right.
Like on the flights, it's like blow into this little tube in order to inflate it, and then this is probably why, so it doesn't like hit you in the side of the face like that. It looks violent, but I mean,
it's dynamic.
You want to float now?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no question of you floating to the top once that's out there. So
no kidding.
They also make us do a swim test just to make sure that, people who are going to small boats don't, know how to swim. So
gotcha. So it's not just, I'm going to sign up for a cruise and go out there. There's a lot more training than just getting aboard the boat, eating nice meals, and then watching the astronauts get out of the capsule. There's a lot more involved.
There is.
I had a ton of great assets over here to show on the stream. Was there anything that y'all wanted to show that I didn't bring up yet? Just as like a final parting thing here.
No, I mean, I think I sent you a picture of the helicopter that we take over there with us kind of getting on board prior to a mission. That's a cool shot to show the helicopters that we're simulating during that training.
Is this one, I think. Is this the right helicopter?
That's the one.
Because I'm like, I got Intrepid, historical helicopters, then I've got Artemis helicopters flying around, I've got this helicopter. This is the right one, though, right?
That's the one.
Okay.
Yeah, we're all getting on board prior to flying out to the recovery vessel. So those are the helicopters that we use. And we have both our SpaceX and NASA teams photographed in this picture prior to heading out for, I think this was Crew 3 recovery. Yeah.
Yeah, this one, JITT1?
JIT1, yep. Just-in-time team number 1.
Ah, gotcha. All right.
We love our acronyms at NASA.
Yeah.
I see it labeled JIT1. I'm like, JIT1, maybe they're going to say JIT, and then I'll know to use that image or something like that. But it's all good. Let's see here. Oh, there was another question about how the helicopters, like you don't have to go down a rope or anything like that to get aboard the recovery vessel, because the recovery vessels actually have, I mean, if you look at them, they're like mostly helipad, it looks like, right?
Yeah.
But that's just specific to the design of how this partner, SpaceX, does it. They have the way that the capsule can come aboard with the little crane thing, and it slides underneath, and they have the room for the astronauts to come out, and then they can transport them with a helicopter. So they have this big helipad, and like it's very much a purpose-designed vessel for specifically going and picking up crews, or ferrying sometimes.
That's exactly right. So this one only does the crew returns. The fairing vessels are a little bit different. Actually, these guys might do fairings as well. That's a little bit outside this. There you go. It's a little outside of what the commercial crew program traditionally does. But for our purposes, we land our helicopters right on that big X. We get out. This is also where we put the crew to get them back home to the shore. They gather into these helicopters on this helideck as well.
Gotcha. So they don't even have to wait for the whole boat to go all the way back. They can hop on the helicopter and end up, I mean, I guess they could just fly the helicopter over to the Cape, even from the western side of Florida, if they're in one of those recovery zones.
And sometimes we do. Traditionally, we have airports set up depending on what splashdown site we're going to be at, but several of our recovery sites take them right back to the Cape.
Just right back over. No kidding.
And then they take a NASA G5 or G3 private jet back home to Ellington, riding in style.
They don't even have to fly themselves in like a trainer. Every now and then we're like, oh, NASA pilots are flying the trainers. Like astronauts are flying. Yeah, so there's one of those on the deck of the Intrepid, isn't there?
There is. There's a T-38 Talent on the
tying it all back together.
Intrepid, come visit.
Okay.
That's the one I've got my name in for. I'm hoping one day I can finagle a flight on one of those. One day.
All right, folks. Well, we have hung out here for an hour. Have we actually hung out for an hour and a half, 90 minutes?
Yeah, time flies.
Time flies when you're digging through questions about the sniffers. No, you think I'm kidding? Like you should see. I'm not going to hold my phone up, but you should see my phone that has so many questions. But that is going to bring us to the end of our show today. Sam and Lily, thank you so much for taking time out of your weekend to come and just chat with us about all the different cool things that are. I say cool because I think that it's all cool. That's involved with getting capsules, getting crew, not just safely from space back home, but out of the water, out of the land, whatever's going on. There's a whole other set of involved training in specialized thinking and engineering and building and things that have to happen to support the astronauts coming back home. So we get the question a ton of the times like, oh, I'm not going to be an astronaut or anything. What skills can I have? Well, think about, we just talked for 90 minutes, barely scratching the surface of how you get an astronaut out of the capsule safely. It's in the water or whatever, back on a ship, on a helicopter, all the way back home again. And Sam and Lily, y'all are critical to making that happen. So thank you so much for spending time with us and just answering all sorts of random questions this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
All right.
I appreciate your interest.
Yeah, no, it's not like scripted. It's not like, okay, the first question will be this, the second question will be this. It's just all over the map. So thank you for being good sports and answering all of our questions. We're coming up just about an hour away from the Axiom 2 launch. And so we are going to continue coverage of that here on the NASA Spaceflight channel if you're watching that. So if you end up with a rocket launch on your screen at the end of this one, don't be confused. That's just because we sort of sent you over to that other stream. But next month, we are having a stream here as part of Astro Live about, Alicia, what's it about?
CubeSats.
CubeSats.
Ta-da! Yes, CubeSat. So if you happen to come by the museum, or if you would like to come by the museum, you might notice that we have an exhibit right now about CubeSats, specifically about Alpha CubeSat, which is something that Cornell Engineering has been working on to create a light sail. They're testing out light sails, the idea of being able to use light to project CubeSats or project anything really further away and at higher speeds, and specifically using holograms and art to do so. We kind of talked about it a little bit, maybe if you happened to see our stream last month on site. But specifically now we're going to be talking a lot more about CubeSats, that particular project, as well as just other CubeSats in general and all of the cool science that goes behind it. So tune in next month, Sunday, June 25th for that. Also, quick plug once again, Fleet Week is coming up this coming week. So if you are in the New York City area, come by the Intrepid. We've got our movie night on Friday. We're showing Top Gun on our flight deck right next to our F-14. Of course, everyone loves it. We do it every year. Come on out, see Top Gun on our flight deck when the sun goes down. And then Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, we've got a whole bunch of fun vendors coming in, lots of partners coming to do cool stuff out on our pier as well, performances, and all sorts of fun for the whole family. Fleet Week is a big deal for us. We love it so much. And we, of course, have those other ships that come in, too, that you can go get training things with and challenge coins and stuff, as we were just talking about as well.
Nice.
So come on out for Fleet Week. Sorry, I had to plug it. And also, yes, CubeSats next month as well.
We cover everything on Astro Live, from recovering human beings from the spacecraft to throwing toasters into space with CubeSats next month. But Sam, Lily, thank you so much for the time today. Alicia, good time as always. And our ASL team as well. ASL team, thank you so much for keeping up with our rapid and not very structured conversation.
Thank you so much to our ASL friends.
That is going to bring us to an end of this show here. Remember, if you didn't get to catch the whole thing, because I know we were sort of like there with the Axiom 2 launch coverage as well, you can watch this anytime. You can scroll back. It's going to be here on all these different channels. It's a video you can check out. So if you were just totally about the Axiom 2 launch, come over. You can watch this back anytime at your convenience. Or if you watch this, you can go watch the Axiom launch coming up here shortly. But Sam Testa, Lily Villarreal, thank you so much for joining us. We will shut down the show for now, and we'll see you nerds later. Thanks for watching, y'all.
Thanks, everyone.
Everybody can watch. We didn't cover this in the practice. So, all right.
And here we go. We have liftoff.
Propulsion continues to be normal.
R68 chamber pressure looks good.
Traveling up. Roger, roger, planet.
Water towers fly! Yes! Tango down to nominal.
Fighting downside FD off. Bring in FD off. Off. It's orange! Orange 25! Oh my god! Oh my god! Decollage! What do you think? Put that in the big bag, Eagle.
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together, back to the moon and beyond.
If the methane would be igniting in the flare, correct?
Yikes. Keep red. We don't need any more of these.